A man is never more deceived than when he convinces himself that he is loved for his essence. That soft, comforting delusion that someone values his heart, his kindness, his vulnerability, is among the most destructive lies a man can tell himself. It has shattered more lives than war ever has. You imagine she cherishes your soul, that she clings to the tenderness you offer so freely. But that's not what she sees. That's not what she wants. Diogenes of Sinope, the wild dog of Athens, would scoff at such fantasies. He lived in a barrel, owned nothing, feared nothing, and spent his life tearing the veils off men who worship illusions. If he stood before you now, he would not console your heartbreak. He would laugh. He would mock your tears and tell you without hesitation, women do not value men. They value utility. Let that truth burn into you. They value utility. Strip away your money, your strength, your ability to elevate her status, and you will see just how quickly love turns into indifference. This is not bitterness. This is not cynicism. This is survival. Diogenes once said, "Why not whip the teacher when the pupil misbehaves?" His point was clear and brutal. We often punish the wrong people. You blame women for using you, for discarding you, but the fault lies with your blindness. You allowed yourself to be used. You offered yourself as a servant and are surprised to be treated like one. Don't blame her nature. Blame your submission to it. Power is not about possession. It is about refusal. When Alexander the Great stood before Diogenes and asked if he wanted anything, Diogenes looked him in the eye and said, "Stand out of my sunlight." That moment defined true freedom. A man who cannot be bought, who cannot be used, who stands unmoved by the offerings of kings. He is untouchable. Alexander had half the world under his command, yet in that moment he was nothing but a shadow, and he knew it. He said, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." Now, what happens when that image is reversed? When it is you who seeks to be chosen, you who yearns to be seen, to be loved, to be needed. You become the shadow. You are moved, not the mover. She does not admire you. She uses you until your usefulness is exhausted, and then you disappear from her life without a second thought. That is the harsh truth. A man is not valued for the warmth of his heart, but for the strength of his spine. A man who cannot walk away, who cannot demand light for himself, is not a man to her. He is an object, a function, a tool. And every tool, no matter how finely crafted, is discarded once it dulls. Stop hoping for unconditional devotion. It does not exist. Women are pragmatic by nature. They calculate, they weigh, and when the scales tip against you, they leave. Not with hatred, not with malice, but with cold efficiency. Diogenes would laugh at your pain, not because he lacked empathy, but because he knew what men refuse to admit. We would rather believe a lie than face a brutal truth. Since you were a child, you were trained to serve, to be polite, to be gentle. You were taught that if you give enough, your time, your effort, your love, you will be rewarded. But what did you get? Betrayal, rejection, indifference. You mistook servitude for strength, and Diogenes, who lived with nothing but his own integrity, would have sneered at your obedience. He once roamed Athens in broad daylight holding a lantern, searching for an honest man. He never found one. And if he walked today through our cities, through your streets, he would still find nothing but men bowing their heads before women, begging for scraps of affection, living not as men but as commodities. Women know what most men never learn. A man who gives without boundaries, who empties himself in the hope of being chosen, is not respected. He is used. A man who refuses to bend, who will not be drained, becomes rare, valuable. The paradox is cruel. The less usable you are, the more desirable you become. Yet men still believe that sacrifice wins loyalty, that giving more secures her affection. But it does the opposite. It makes you predictable, pliable, and eventually replaceable. Diogenes endured hardship not with complaint, but with simplicity. He stripped his needs to the bone, and by needing nothing, he became invincible. Can you say the same? No. You need her presence, her affection, her validation. You starve without it. And so, you are exploited. Every man who fears losing a woman has already lost himself. She can feel it. She uses it. Because if you cannot stand without her, then you were never standing at all. Diogenes was called a dog. He embraced it. He begged without shame. He lived in filth. He mocked the powerful. Why? Because he understood that dignity comes from independence, not approval. Until you learn this, you will remain on your knees before those who see you only as a means to an end. Understand this clearly. Women will accept your devotion, your resources, your time, but they will not respect you for giving them. Respect is born from resistance, not obedience. Women only admire the man who doesn't fold, not because they are cruel, but because their nature demands strength. They test you, constantly. They push, they provoke, they pull. Not consciously, but instinctively. They are probing for the line you won't cross, and when they find there isn't one, when you bend, give, submit, they lose interest. Not because you weren't good enough, but because you were too easy to use. Diogenes knew this long before modern psychology tried to name it. When asked what the most beautiful thing in the world was, he replied, freedom of speech. Freedom, that was his obsession. Freedom from need, from illusion, from control. And by refusing to need what others offered, he became untouchable. He mocked the very chains you wear with pride, your relationships, your reputation, your possessions. He saw that men were dressing up their servitude as success. And are you so different? Look at yourself, waiting for her to text, rereading her messages, starving for crumbs of attention. You call it love, but it is slavery. Because women do not ask, do I love him? They ask, can I use him? Can he elevate me, protect me, serve me? If the answer is yes, they stay, until they no longer need what you offer. Then they go. Not because they are evil, but because they are designed to move towards strength and away from weakness. The man who needs nothing cannot be used. That is the power Diogenes held. That is why Alexander admired him, and that is why women admire the man who refuses to kneel. But here lies the tragedy. Most men are terrified of rejection, of solitude, of sitting alone in the silence of their own presence. That fear makes them soft. You have been trained not to lead, but to follow, not to master yourself, but to serve others. You were educated to be polite, to obey, and women can smell it on you. They see that your life is built around their approval. So they take, not because they're cruel, but because your need invites it. She may complain when you assert yourself. She may accuse you of cruelty. But deep down, she knows the truth. The man who cannot be used is the only man worth keeping. Every other man is disposable. A wallet, a chauffeur, a temporary provider, until the next one comes along. And you, too scared of being alone, accept that fate. You chain yourself to anyone who offers you relief from your own emptiness, and they know it. So they take, and you give, and you call it love. But Diogenes would laugh at your despair, because he knew solitude is not punishment, it is power. He lived in filth and declared himself freer than kings. When mocked for having nothing, he said, "If I lack possessions, then you lack freedom." He made his loneliness a fortress, because a man who can sit alone without trembling cannot be manipulated. You, on the other hand, are ruled by fear. You stay silent when disrespected. You endure humiliation for the fantasy that she might one day see your worth. But she won't, because your need for her approval makes you disposable. She knows it, and so she uses you, even if she doesn't realize she's doing it. Diogenes once discarded his only cup after seeing a child drink from his hands. That was his lesson. Freedom begins when need ends. You panic when ignored for a day. You unravel at the first sign of distance, because your identity depends on her attention. That makes you a tool, nothing more. You were not born weak. You were trained to be weak. Your teachers told you to be nice. Your stories told you to sacrifice. And so you grew up dragging chains disguised as virtue. And then you wonder why she leaves, why she no longer values you when you've given her everything. Because what you call love, she sees as submission. What you call sacrifice, she sees as self-erasure. And women do not admire erasure. They admire defiance. Diogenes rejected every social script. He mocked Plato by plucking a chicken and calling it man. He wasn't just attacking philosophy. He was revealing how easily we mistake appearance for essence. And that's what you do. You think your goodness, your loyalty, your generosity define your worth. But to her, those are just feathers. They are not strength. She tests you to see if there's steel beneath them. And most of you fail. You bend, you yield, because you fear losing her more than you fear losing yourself. And that's why you lose both. Diogenes spat on obedience. He scorned wealth. He laughed at kings. Because he knew, dependence is the true prison. And today, men live in that prison willingly. You speak for her approval. You dress for her gaze. You deny your instincts to preserve her comfort. And you wonder why she never respects you. Respect is born in resistance, not in compromise. Women admire men they cannot bend, not because they like it, but because they need it, because their nature demands to be challenged, not served. You are not a partner. You are a dependent. And dependents are used, not valued. Until you can face solitude without trembling, you will never command respect. Until you can sit in silence and not beg for her gaze, you will always be disposable. The only weapon that made Diogenes untouchable was shamelessness. He destroyed society's power over him by refusing to be embarrassed. He urinated in public. He mocked customs. He exposed the absurdity of shame. Not because he sought chaos, but because he sought freedom. Shamelessness is not vulgarity. It is independence. The refusal to let anyone define you. Until you own this truth, you will always be manipulated by women's greatest weapon, shame. They know your weakness. They know you crave to be seen as noble, kind, respectable, and so they shame you into compliance. They say real men don't say no. Real men give. Real men sacrifice. And you believe it. You let shame bend you. But Diogenes proved a man who owns his shamelessness cannot be used. He stands alone, and in doing so, he becomes untouchable. While you, modern man, remain enslaved by appearance, enslaved by approval. You are shaped not by truth, but by the gaze of women. And that is why you are discarded. A woman cannot manipulate a man who feels no shame. She can withhold, accuse, mock, but if he does not move, she is powerless. Diogenes lived as a beggar, yet kings envied him. He had nothing, yet possessed more freedom than any ruler. He was feared, hated, mocked, but never used. That is manhood. to live in such a way that no one can turn you into their instrument. Women only value men they cannot exploit. Until you become that man, you will remain in chains. So reduce your needs. Let no one use them against you. Stand in your own light and never move, not even for a queen. Live shamelessly, and only then will you be free. Only then will you be valued. And if these words cut, it is because they were meant to. Let them wound you. Let them heal you. Let them free you. You were not created to be a servant to someone else's comfort. You were not born to spend your life proving your worth to someone who only sees you as temporary convenience. And yet, here you are, bending, sacrificing, softening your words, measuring your tone, tiptoeing around emotional landmines, all for the hope that maybe, just maybe, she'll stay a little longer. But she won't. Because the moment she knows you're too afraid to lose her, she already has no reason to stay. This is the gravity men rarely face. You cannot love with fear. You cannot lead while trembling. You cannot earn respect by asking for permission to be yourself. And every time you compromise who you are for the sake of someone else's approval, you sell a piece of your manhood. You trade it for silence, for comfort, for attention that vanishes the second someone more valuable walks through the door. Women do not desire the man who grovels. They may smile. They may accept your gifts, your kindness, your time. But they never respect the man who offers it all freely, expecting only to be chosen. You mistake this transaction for love, but it is not love. It is dependence. It is a hunger that makes you prey. Diogenes would spit on that hunger. He would call it disease, and he would be right, because men who cannot sit in their own solitude, who need constant validation, who chase affection like a dog chasing scraps, these men are not free. They are not strong. They are not men in the eyes of those they pursue. They are emotional slaves, and deep down, they know it. You want to be valued? Learn to walk alone. Learn to be quiet in your own company. Learn to face your fears without reaching for someone else's hand, because the moment you can do that, truly do that, everything changes. Women feel it. They see it. They sense it in your eyes, in your tone, in the way you carry yourself. Not pride, not arrogance, but certainty. The kind of certainty that cannot be bought, or swayed, or shamed. That certainty is the only thing women truly respect. Everything else is negotiable. Your looks, your money, your charm, all temporary. But the man who does not bend, the man who says, "This is who I am, and I do not care if you stay or go," that man becomes rare. And in his rarity, he becomes valuable. Do you think Diogenes begged to be liked? He defecated in public, spat on social norms, lived in filth, and called kings fools. And yet even emperors stood in his shadow, because they sensed that beneath his ragged appearance was a fortress of self-possession no wealth could penetrate. Compare that to you, scrolling through your phone at midnight, rereading her messages, searching for clues, wondering what you did wrong, what more you could have given, what better version of yourself you might have presented to earn her affection. You call it introspection, but it is self-erasure. Every time you silence your instincts for her approval, you betray yourself. Every time you tolerate disrespect to avoid loneliness, you feed the illusion that love must be earned through suffering. But suffering is not strength. It is desperation. And desperation has no place in the soul of a man who wants to be free. You cannot buy love with obedience. You cannot trade sacrifice for dignity. And the moment you believe otherwise, you give her the script to dominate you. She doesn't have to be cruel. She only has to be indifferent. That's all it takes to break a man who needs her more than he needs his own integrity. Ask yourself, When did you last say no and mean it? When did you last set a boundary that was enforced, not negotiated? When did you last choose discomfort over compromise? Because that is where power lives. Not in what you give, but in what you withhold. Women don't test your generosity. They test your edge. They push to find out where your line is drawn. And if they can move it, inch by inch, favor by favor, demand by demand, they lose faith in you. Not because you failed to meet their needs, but because you failed to protect your own soul. Diogenes never asked for permission to exist. He simply did, without fear, without shame. And that is why he could not be used, because he needed nothing, because he expected nothing, because he owed nothing. And you? You owe everything. You owe her attention. You owe her explanation. You owe her comfort. You owe her apology for being too strong, too direct, too firm. And in that debt, you are owned. You wonder why she doesn't respect you, why she chooses the man who speaks less, gives less, bends less. It is not a mystery. She respects strength. She respects distance. She respects the man who can say no without flinching. And she uses the man who always says yes. You are not broken. You are trained, conditioned, programmed from boyhood to equate submission with goodness, sacrifice with nobility, suffering with worth. You've been told that the highest form of masculinity is servitude, that to be a good man is to be a useful one. But usefulness is not the same as value. A plow is useful, a hammer is useful. But when they are no longer needed, they are tossed into the shed, rusting in silence. And that is what will happen to you, used, worn, and forgotten. Not because you lacked heart, but because you lacked spine. Diogenes had neither wife, nor home, nor possessions. But what he had was invincibility, because no one could take anything from him. He had already given up the illusion of need, and in doing so, he could not be enslaved. That is the posture of a man who cannot be broken. You say you want to be loved for who you are, but you don't even know who that is. You've wrapped yourself in masks. One for her, one for society, one for your friends. You hide your true self behind what you think others want you to be, and then you wonder why no one sees you. How can they see you when you don't stand still long enough to be known? You change shape to fit the mold. You change tone to avoid conflict. You change yourself to avoid rejection. And so the world treats you as replaceable, because you are. No one respects a chameleon. They respect the man who chooses to be one thing, and remains that thing, even when it costs him comfort, even when it costs him connection, especially when it costs him approval. You think strength is loud, but true strength is silent. It is not the roar of a man trying to prove himself. It is the stillness of a man who already knows who he is. That is the kind of man who terrifies the world. That is the kind of man Diogenes became. He did not beg to be loved. He did not perform to be chosen. He stood beneath the sun and said to the greatest emperor of his age, "Move." He needed nothing, and because he needed nothing, the world had no hold on him. Now ask yourself, what are you still holding on to? Her attention? Her loyalty? Her presence? What would you crumble without? That is the thing that owns you. That is the thing that weakens you. That is the thing that makes you disposable. Until you can live without it, you will never be free. Until you can walk away without looking back, you will always be waiting to be picked. You will always be on your knees before a gate that leads nowhere. Do not confuse fear with love. Do not mistake her comfort with commitment. She will stay while you are useful. She will smile while you serve. But she will never kneel before the man who kneels first. She will never chase the man who waits to be chosen. And so I say again, stop begging to be seen. Stop sacrificing to be selected. Stop trying to be good enough for someone who does not care what goodness cost you. Learn to walk alone. Learn to live without applause. Learn to stop needing. Because the less you need, the more powerful you become. The less you yield, the more respected you become. And the less you care about being accepted, the more impossible you are to replace. Let that truth become your shield. Let it carve away the softness that has made you prey. Let it teach you that peace is not found in her arms. It is found in your refusal to bow. This world has enough useful men. What it needs is men who cannot be used. And if you become one of them, you will never again have to wonder why you were forgotten. Because you never will be. You believe you must earn love through loss. That if you bleed enough, bend enough, endure enough, you will finally be rewarded with permanence. But permanence was never promised to you. And love, real love, does not sprout from the soil of submission. It demands no offering. It exists where strength meets presence. And if your presence depends on appeasement, you were never present as yourself to begin with. Look at your reflection, not in a mirror, but in your life. Look at what you've tolerated. Look at the way you've bent your spine for someone who wouldn't lift a finger to meet you halfway. Look at the silences you swallowed, the truths you buried, the boundaries you erased just to be held. That is not love. That is fear masquerading as devotion. And she can feel it. A woman always knows. She knows when a man is terrified of losing her. She knows when he will do anything, say anything, endure anything to keep her. And the moment she senses that, she stops seeing you as a man. She starts seeing you as a leash she holds, one she can tighten or loosen depending on her mood. You can lie to yourself. You can call it romance. You can call it sacrifice. You can even call it loyalty. But what it truly is slavery, a self-chosen bondage. And as long as you choose it, she has no reason to choose you. You weren't made to be agreeable. You weren't made to be molded. You were made to stand. And if you don't, then you are not a man. You are simply another soft echo in a world already flooded with silence. Diogenes understood this better than anyone. That's why he was feared, not because he had power or position or armies, but because he had nothing that could be used against him. No weakness disguised as love. No vanity disguised as humility. No need disguised as care. He did not seek to be respected. He demanded it by refusing to be anyone but himself. He did not negotiate with society's expectations. He defied them, and he taught, through mockery, through shame, through stubborn example, that the man who refuses to be shaped by the world becomes the only man the world cannot break. And you still believe your value is in how much you endure, that she'll admire you more the longer you stay silent under disrespect, that she'll cherish you if you just hold on through enough emotional droughts. But no flower blooms in poisoned soil. You can stay and stay and stay, but she will never love the version of you that needed to disappear in order to keep her around. She doesn't want your silence. She wants your fire. She doesn't want your obedience. She wants your edge. But you've cut yourself dull in the name of being good to us, and now you wonder why she doesn't admire the blade you no longer carry. What you must understand is this. Women are drawn to power, not the power of domination, but the power of presence. The man who can say no. The man who walks without explanation. The man who doesn't care if she stays, because he knows who he is whether she's beside him or not. That man does not chase. He does not beg. He does not compromise what matters. She doesn't want to be your everything. She wants to be chosen by someone who already has everything. And that includes himself. You gave her your time, your energy, your devotion, not from abundance, but from hunger. You hoped it would be enough. You hoped she would see. But hunger is not a gift. It is a weakness. And weakness is never admired. It is pitied at best, exploited at worst. This is not cruelty. This is law. Emotional law, natural law, psychological law. The man who cannot walk away is always walked over. Not because the woman is evil, but because she is responding to your energy with instinct. Women do not consciously decide to exploit you. They simply follow the scent of power or the absence of it. So you must stop giving yourself away. You must stop performing for affection. You must stop measuring your worth in terms of how much you can endure for someone who has no obligation to stay. This is not strength. This is surrender dressed as devotion. Until you kill the need to be chosen, you will never be seen as a choice. Until you can love without attachment, offer without expectation, and walk without fear, you will never be respected. And respect, more than love, is what anchors a woman to a man. Because love without respect decays. It erodes into contempt. And that is the fate of every man who gives all and demands nothing. The man who is respected is the man who can vanish. The man who is loved and still says no. And the man who offers, not because he's desperate to give, but because he is already full. He is not waiting to be completed. He is not offering his ribs to be made whole. He is whole already. Diogenes needed no one, and in that state he became the most powerful man in Athens. He mocked those who bowed to their reputations. He scoffed at men who cloaked their emptiness with property, status, and wives. He knew that the man who depends on anything outside himself is already in chains, even if those chains are draped in gold and love songs. You must strip yourself down. You must burn the illusions, the fantasy that she will save you, that she will one day recognize your sacrifices and reward them, that she will love you for the heart you placed in her hands. No, she will only love the man who kept his heart whole, who never let it become a gift she could open and leave behind. Women follow strength. They stay with certainty. They honor boundaries. They crave presence. But most of all, they test. Constantly. Not to hurt you, but to find your limits. To feel the edges of your character. To discover if you are real or just another mask waiting to be peeled off. She will push you. She will provoke. She will measure. And most of you will fold under the weight of that pressure. You will confuse tolerance for love. You will interpret your flexibility as virtue, but she does not see it that way. She sees a man with no walls, and a house with no walls is not a home. It is a ruin. Your kindness means nothing without strength. Your loyalty means nothing without lines that cannot be crossed. Your love means nothing if it is given by a man who cannot stand on his own. So build yourself, not into someone who is liked, but into someone who is untouchable, not by hiding, not by pretending, but by removing the need to be understood, accepted, or adored. A man like that becomes mythic, rare, the kind women speak of, but rarely encounter. And when you become that man, truly become him, women will feel it in your silence. They will feel it in the weight of your glance. They will feel it in the way you do not chase. Because men who are complete do not chase. They do not kneel. They do not break. They choose. They set the terms. And if the terms are not met, they walk, not out of rage, not out of spite, but because they know their value. Because they know that a man who must give everything to be loved is not loved at all. He is only used. The world will call you cold. It will call you arrogant. It will call you selfish. Let it. Let them scream while you sit in your peace. Let them throw stones while you stand in your sunlight. Because no matter how loud the noise becomes, the man who is free inside cannot be disturbed. Diogenes was hated by many, but he feared none, because his power came not from others, but from within. And that is the power you must claim. Refuse to be used, refuse to be bent, refuse to be consumed. You are not bread at a feast. You are not a tool on a shelf. You are not a pet waiting to be praised. You are a man. And until you live as one, no one will ever treat you like one. Become the man who cannot be moved. Become the man who says no. Become the man who needs nothing and commands everything. Only then will she respect you. Only then will you be free.